So part one of the absolute state of MMORPGs from LazyPeon has already been live on this channel, but it actually brought up a lot of where I think I'm disagreeing with the absolute state of LazyPeon. I watched this for the first time and I'm reacting to it, and what I find myself struggling with in part one in a much greater level of detail is that what I believe is happening here is that LazyPeon has a set of expectations on what he expects the MMO genre to be, on what he would hope a successful thing would be, and when that has failed to be fulfilled from where he was in love with the genre 10 or 15 years ago, as it has continued to mature in what the industry has decided is valuable, it is differed from what he has decided is valuable. And as a result, he feels very frustrated with the genre, not feeling that it's living up to the expectations that he has, even though very clearly as these companies rise and fall, and as dev teams have success, as we have critical acclaim, as we have players loving the game and players quitting these games, it is clear that it is fulfilling somebody's expectations, not everybody's. And I think he just falls in that latter group there. So let's jump into part two. I'm continuing on from about 7 minutes into this 18-minute video. Let's see if I can make it through all this without interrupting so much.
From a design point of view, what Black Desert did with its Node Wars and Sieges was really great for PvP players, but at this point I was hoping an MMO would come along that gives me that same feeling of excitement and care for the community and people that I'm playing with in a PvE environment. PvE in MMOs has never really had a massive impact on the world, and as a result you don't really care what other people are doing PvE wise. I guess for an MMO to achieve the things that I want in terms of that feeling I get from the PvE, it would have to be a lot more ambitious. I really don't feel as though our current MMOs are ambitious enough. They just seem very safe and run-of-the-mill. I want a bloody MMO where there's hidden bosses, players need to work together to figure out where those bosses are, how to summon them. I want world bosses where there's multiple guilds having to band together to find enough players to bloody take the things out. Hundreds of players on the screen attacking a fucking giant rock.
So hundreds of players on the screen is something that actually doesn't generate as much fun as it sounds like, because what ends up happening is half the people end up standing as still as this still frame here, because there's no accountability on the individual player. And so tuning content so that it's hard enough for that group, but then getting them all aligned has actually resulted in games choosing smaller and smaller groups. We've moved in WoW from 40 mans on down, and in Final Fantasy, when you talk about getting into PvP matches, it feels like it needs to come down. Getting people aligned with the same goals allows you to push those goals further. If I'm trying to pick a place to eat and I get 100 people in a room and I have to pick a place for all 100 people, I have to pick something that no one person may be super excited about. I have to pick something that's generic. Maybe it offers a couple of different entree choices for everybody, or it's something that fits the vast majority of dietary needs. Maybe there's dietary restrictions. So we're talking about things like having a vegetarian option, having a no dairy option, having no pork, having possibly a vegan option. We're talking about people who do want meat. We're talking about various portion sizes. It's not as simple as ordering pizza and being done with it. Not everybody likes pizza. And so when you talk about satisfying 100 people, it gets very difficult very fast to make sure that everybody is aligned with the same goal, especially if your goal is to now make that the most exquisite meal anybody's ever had. So what ends up happening is when you talk about fancy restaurants having large parties, maybe they're catering to a large event, they move to a fixed menu. They move to a limited item menu, that the goal is satisfying as many people as possible with a menu small enough that it's doable at that scale. If you want to have a truly award-winning dining experience, if you want to have something that is worth being astounded by, it is actually much easier to do in that smaller, more intimate setting. A table for 8, a table for 6, a table for 2. These are much more doable goals. And so I think asking for somebody to be ambitious, but then be ambitious in a way that 100 people will all align, and that this 100 people and this 100 people and this 100 people and this 100 people, that 1,000,000 people will all get into groups of 100 and run this, it's just not possible. And so from there, you would have to then create a massive buffet of nothing but 5-star things. And there's only a handful of places in the world that can do that. Las Vegas being probably the pinnacle of it. And you know what funds Las Vegas? Huge amounts of money. And where does that money come from? Gambling. So this very quickly talks about, great, we've designed this. You use that word ambition. What pays the bills? We have mobile games out there with $10 and $20 million budgets generating hundreds of millions of dollars. So when you talk about going and securing investor money, that's the return they're expecting. If you don't want to have investors, that's great. Where's your $10 to $20 million that you're willing to put on the line? And if you lose it, you're probably going to have to go back to your day job because for some reason you amassed that amount of money once. What are the odds that you have more than that? right? The game developers are not known for across the industry being the highest paid for their craft. And so as a result, the vast majority of them, I would say, don't have $10 to $20 million, even as a collective. So they have to go get this investment money. So then who pays for it? And the only place in the world I've known that can offer exquisite 5-star dining to hundreds of thousands of people that are all satisfied on a mass level at an individual level requires an amount of money that has been called the city of sin, that has been called a lot of mean names. And I personally have enjoyed every trip to Vegas I've ever taken. But there's a reason that it's an isolated place and that is not repeated over every city worldwide. There's a reason that it's not like that. And that's because not everybody wants to be inundated with that level of gambling on a day-to-day basis. And so what funds this stuff? Constant influxes of money that people didn't think they would part with. Is that what you want to pay for MMOs? So it becomes a question. And if not, what is your proposal for how to monetize content where we go spend 8 and 12 months putting a boss out there and then hoping to God players have trouble finding it? That's not content that's going to engage everybody. There's going to be a lot of people that don't want to have to find a boss. You put a dragon in the trailer, I want to kill a dragon. You spent 8 months developing this dragon fight so that it's fun and engaging for 100 people. You've done the impossible. Why hide it? So it's just not that easy. It sounds that easy. I wish it, well, why don't they just make it fun? Why don't they just get good? I think he's simplifying things, that there's a reason that the solutions aren't out there. And it's not that no game developer wants content that's fun for a lot of people. It's not that no game developer wants something that's an experience no one else has ever had. It's how do you deliver that for a mass scale of people, and then how do you pay for it?
Rock monster coming out of a mountain, and he's so big that he doesn't even appear on your screen. This was where I was hoping we would be at with MMOs when I was thinking about the future of the MMOs back when I was in high school. And then once you've got that massive, memorable, community effort PvE content, there needs to be a way of incorporating PvP into it as well. Like, maybe you attack the giant rock monster in the mountains, everyone becomes flagged for PvP, and in doing so, you need to then delegate a guild or two to defend people from the PvP players that just want to fucking gank and ruin it for everyone else. That would be a memorable, chaotic, massively multiplayer experience, one that I was really hoping we would kind of see by now, and one that I was hoping we would maybe get in the future, but it doesn't really seem as though that's the case. I'm obviously just pulling ideas out of my ass, by the way, but I'm trying to give you a sense of why I'm so frustrated with...
You're frustrated because you pulled an idea out of nowhere, thought through none of the fine details, and then said, why aren't people doing this? I had such a great idea. I walked into the boardroom, I said 3 sentences. Why is this not an expertly crafted, on-time delivered, on-budget delivered game? There's a whole lot of answers to that. And each one of them is every bit as valid as the last, and they're all happening simultaneously. Some of them are money conversations. Some of them are logistics. Some of them are timing. Some of them are coordinating with hardware developers so they can be on console, be on enough platforms to reach the size audience you're talking about here. Some of them are getting licensing, getting music, doing game design. Some of them are talking about player testing, getting to demographics. They're all long before you talk about what does the big dragon look like that is so big that you can only see its foot. If I can only see its foot, then why don't we just render its foot? Why am I going to pay to draw a whole dragon that nobody's ever going to see the whole thing? That's why when we get on the backs of dragons in content that's that big, they don't spend a bunch of time dealing with detail on the other side of the dragon. That's why when we get into content where we just fight the feet, you just see the feet. They didn't spend a bunch of time drawing his face, and man, what a waste of my sub money if they did. Like, before you put these ideas out there, before you go and just criticize, like, one of the things that I try to work on with myself, and I'm not horribly good at, is make sure that you're going to stop and offer suggestions. Not because your suggestions are perfect, and so I appreciate that he's offering something, but if you're going to call for this big of a change, and you're saying that you just have some ideas that you're pulling out of your bum, why not spend a tiny bit more time making them into an idea you actually feel like, okay, and this is how that would work from there, and this is how that would work from there. Not because it's your job to be a game developer, but because in the process of doing that, in the action of doing that, if we toss that idea out there, we're giving them feedback. Back to the first video where we talk about feature benefit. They can take our idea and they can at least understand where we're coming from, even if they don't take our idea and run with it. They can say, oh, I guess that is a form of communication. When you expanded on your idea, I took your initial one-sentence thing and I interpreted it totally differently. But now that you've expanded on it, I see what you're getting at. Also, it helps us get ourselves to a point where we have a little more empathy with why the industry is the way it is. Why things are the way they are. And games are not perfect. I'm the first to complain about games that I spend dozens of hours a week playing. But I understand why those flaws exist. And I don't feel that in 10 years, the industry is going to be flawless. We're going to trade a set of current bugs out, current pain points, for solutions that are going to introduce a new unseen set of problems. You're asking for something and then saying, well, I threw out like one idea. I don't know why anybody can't just follow that through. And the answer is because of all the things that come after that.
With this genre and how far from its potential I think we are. As an MMORPG content creator, I really feel like I'm covering a genre that's 1 or 2 generations behind everything else. Like, look at the top 10-ish MMOs. World of Warcraft, 2004. Final Fantasy XIV, 2013. Elder Scrolls Online, 2014. Guild Wars 2, 2012. Black Desert Online, 2014. Old School RuneScape. I mean, it's Old School RuneScape based on 2007 game released 2013. Terra 2011, Arcade 2013, SWOTOR 2011, Albion Online 2017. We haven't had a big top 10 MMORPG since Black Desert Online in 2014, and it's had its remaster.
You just listed games from 2017. Over a 20-year period, you can list 20 major titles, major successes. And because MMOs are player population based, as you're calling for, they take time to build up. They don't have an immediate adoption rate. So this year when we get Blue Protocol, this year when we get PSO2, this year when we get New World, this year when we get, all of these games that don't have an established audience, maybe PSO2 does, maybe they draw something in. But when we get something that doesn't have an established player base, or we try to revitalize an old one, it doesn't immediately start out. And so you listed games all the way through 2017. We're only in 2020. That means the game is only 3 years old. That means it might be in its first title. That's why it's not appearing in a top 10 list. Over a 20-year span, you listed 20 games in a genre that, when you talk about dollars invested to dollars revenue, doesn't justify the amount of titles it does have. And yet there are more coming because developers are excited to work on these. You're asking why you don't have a dynasty when you haven't given it enough time to be so. You're asking why we don't have another triple platinum artist from the last 6 months. Gosh, it's been like over a year. Of course it has. So for a genre that started in the early 2000s, it's less than 20 years old in its true adoption rate. Yes, they go back before that, but World of Warcraft is the first title that on a massive scale, to where there were people who were not looking for MMORPGs and found one anyway. When it was getting headlines in major media press outlets, places like actual magazines you'd see on a newsstand, not a gamer magazine, not in some forum that us gamers were already on. Places where my parents were asking questions. For that's our point. So we are less than 20 years after that. They were being developed before that, and there were ones before World of Warcraft. They didn't start the genre. We have gotten a lot of titles, and we have moved a very long way from World of Warcraft Classic, from Final Fantasy XI, from Old School RuneScape, from EverQuest. We have moved a long way from Guild Wars 1. We have moved a long way from these games. And we romanticize them because that's how our brains are wired. We're there to enjoy the good details. And, we can wash over how bad something was. But have you gone back and tried to play a game on an old school console? They don't necessarily all hold up. Some do. Some don't. The majority don't.
In 2018, so it does feel like probably the most modern MMO in terms of visuals and combat system. But, you know, it's a Korean game. It's never going to reach its full potential because of the monetization. If you look back over the past 3 or 4 years, we haven't had a new top 10 MMORPG release. 2021's a pretty big year, really, because we've got New World coming in August.
I do think that's a key point here, is over both of these videos, I've been criticizing him for these things, but I'm in 2021 looking at 2021. He was in 2020 looking at 2020. And I will say that my caveat to that is in 2020, nobody should have been looking at 2020. What a crap year.
With the graphics and combat system alone, that game's going to be an easy top 10, so at least that's some content. What else have we got? Ashes of Creation coming 2022, 2023. This is the MMO that I've got most of my hopes on, because from a design point of view, it is actually setting out to achieve that feeling that I want of massively multiplayer, both in terms of PvE and PvP.
I'm actually concerned with how big the scope is of Ashes of Creation. I think they're getting to where they're promising to be too many things and they're not honing in, and as a result they're either going to have to keep pushing the dates back like Cyberpunk, or they're going to fail to meet expectations, because we're going to have built up such an expectation in our head, like we did going into games like No Man's Sky or Anthem, that when either there's critical failures or there's just a lack of delivering on expectations, where maybe the underlying game would have been good had we not overhyped it, we're going to be putting ourselves up for failure.
If Ashes of Creation fails, I'd probably just stop covering MMOs altogether.
Bold claim.
Honestly, that's the one game that I feel has the best chance and is actually attempting to hit some of the potential of the massively multiplayer aspect of this genre. Arcade 2, I guess that's going to be a true next-gen top 10 MMO coming out 2022 to 2023. It's a Korean game, so it's going to be ruined by monetization. It will probably be fun for like a few months. It'll be one of those games like Black Desert that's fun, but it's never going to reach its potential. You've got the upcoming Lord of the Rings.
So what is his definition of potential there? They design all this content and then they find a way to pay for it, and then he would prefer the content without the way to pay for it? Like, the reason these games can do this is because they make a crazy amount of money.
MMO from Amazon Game Studios, not expecting to see anything playable from that game till about 2024. We don't really know anything about this game yet, so it's hard to even make a comment on. And then you've got Riot Games recently announcing that they're working on an MMORPG. Once again, we know absolutely nothing about this game. So in the next 4 or 5 years, that's like 5 games that could possibly be top 10 MMORPGs releasing. The content is very scarce. Obviously, there's a lot more upcoming MMORPGs.
That's his music. I was like, what is that sound?
RPGs than that, but I don't think they're going to hit the top 10. Like, we've got Elion from Kakao Games. That feels like a 2012, 2013 MMO, and it looks like it too. So that's not going to be a top 10 game. We've got Fractured. Cool.
I don't think looks has anything to do with it. I think we put a lot into looks because it's shiny and it can help draw people in. But Minecraft has like a bajillion players playing it, and it's not known for being beautiful. Roblox is the same way. WoW Classic had an overwhelming response. So will D2's relaunch. I don't know that aesthetics is as important as everybody says it is.
Game, but it's very, very niche. We've got Lost Ark, that already feels outdated. Crimson Desert, that's going to be a single-player game or a GTA-styled MMO kind of game. Not really massively multiplayer. Core Punk, once again, not really ambitious enough. Top-down game. Blue Protocol, cool anime MMO. Not really massively multiplayer, though, and only focuses on PvE. Once again, the scope of that game is not that big.
So to be massively multiplayer, it must have PvP. Okay. I'm just trying to understand his definition here, because clearly he's disappointed with the genre, but I think it comes down to where is he defining his expectations. And I think he said it a couple times now, so clearly PvP is a must.
Camelot Unchained, this could be a cool PvP game if it ever actually releases, which I doubt it will based on the incredibly slow progress of the dev team over the past few years. Crowfall, another PvP only game. This game should actually release fairly soon, but I don't see it being a top 10 MMO because the scope of the game isn't really that big. Pantheon Rise of the Fallen, by the time it releases, if it ever releases, I feel as though it's going to be so outdated or so niche that it's not going to break the top 10 MMOs once again. Titan Reach, extremely niche.
So is the game only successful if it places top 10 in the genre? If your goal is to move a genre forward, does it have to be top 10 in active adoption? Does a movie have to be top 10 most grossing of all time to impact the genre? To change cinematography forever? To change the way we do things? To create a new type of shot, a new way of presentation, a new way to introduce a character, a new way to tell a story, a new way to have a montage, a new way to introduce or use music or sensory input, just sound design in general? Does a game have to break the top 10 to be considered innovative? If our goal is to be innovative, if the goal is to define the success of a genre based on it feeling stale, does it matter if it doesn't place top 10 in adoption rate? It can impact those top 10 indirectly. They can all learn from it. But if it sits at number 11, is the genre as a whole a failure? I don't think it is, but it feels like that's what he's saying. It feels like as another definition, it needs to not only have PvP, but it needs to have large, wide-scale adoption rate to the point that it places top 10 in the active user estimates, which is all those are because nobody releases the real numbers.
Niche game, third-person RuneScape, and Mortal Online 2, another very niche PvP game. And then we've got a list of like 50 other old-school MMORPGs that are so niche and so old-school, some of which I've covered on this channel, some of which I've tried to make videos about but cancelled because they're so boring. I'm not even going to get into that. The absolute state of the genre, honestly, and I feel like the community as a whole with MMOs have been so used to just playing absolute garbage or playing such mediocre games that our standards are so incredibly low now. As an MMO content creator, I actually kind of hate covering new MMOs because the MMO community are so desperate for a new MMO to be good that they willingly look past the obvious flaws that a game would have. Look at back when Bless Online released. People were so desperate for that game to be good that any content creator for the first week that spoke negatively about that game was hit by a ton of dislikes by a massive group of people just in huge denial. And look at where that game is now, shut down, because it was shit. This happens with every new upcoming MMO, by the way. I remember before New World released, Kira TV, a fellow content creator, definitely check out his stuff by the way, great content creator, he was raising some very valid concerns about New World, and people were shitting on him so hard in the comments. The denial brigade were out in full force, and look where we are now. The game had its beta, everyone had the same opinion that the game needed to be delayed, it wasn't ready, it wasn't good enough. And looking back, everything he said was right, all of the concerns he had was right, but at the time, people just willingly ignored media.
I mean, for a game to be big, we have to have people willing to take a chance on it. And so you can't immediately take the naysayers at their full face value. On the other hand, a lot of times the naysayers do bring up some valid concerns. Some of these, such as shallow weapon mastery talent trees, you may not know that right away. No swimming, not an important part of an MMO for me. Inconsistent sound levels, not something that I may run into depending on how I have my sound settings. A lot of times in MMOs, for example, unless they have just astounding music design, I turn music all the way down, and so I'm really only dealing with sound effects. So, I think territory wars are an absolute mess. Okay, well, I don't know what that was for this. I haven't spent any time with New World. I believe that's what this was for. But if they feel really fun the first, let's say, 80 hours, a content creator, right? And now that I've moved full time, I'm feeling this difference. I'm getting more playtime in a week than I used to get in a month. I went full time in January. It is totally different. I'm not a better player, but I am a broader player. And so I'm exploring more systems with more hours. It doesn't necessarily make me better at those systems unless I actively seek some objective measure of improvement. But it does give me more playtime. And so if something takes you 80 hours to feel like it's a mess or lacks depth, for a content creator, they'll hit that threshold in week 1, week 2, week 3. But for a casual player playing the game 1 or 2 hours a week, that could be months. And in that time, a game could be patched, a game could be updated. When you talk about games like Final Fantasy XIV on roughly a 16-week patch cycle, if something takes a casual player 16 weeks, then right as they finish, there's more content. But a content creator may go, well, I played 16 times as much as them, and I got it all done in a week, and I just feel that these other 15 weeks are boring. that doesn't immediately make us relatable. So, like, I think saying that somebody turned out right doesn't mean that we were wrong for doubting them, disagreeing with them, wanting to get to that conclusion on our own. Calling out doomsayers up front just because... Do I think New World stands a great chance of succeeding? No, but that's based on the fact that most new IP doesn't succeed in the space. So it's a safe bet. The house tends to shut new... the house wins. The house tends to shut new MMOs down. People have a distrust of Amazon Game Studios. They do. They have yet to build up that track record of CD Projekt Red, which is earned, not given. And so it's more a lack of content from them and not really a bunch of they have burned every player 9 million times. So they are not actively disliked to the degree that they are just not actively defended enough because they haven't earned that. CD Projekt Red gave a lot of that up with the way they handled Cyberpunk. But I don't think they gave it all up. They still have a very fervent set of fans, as opposed to look at Bethesda fans who were burned so heavily by the series of mistakes that surrounded Fallout 76 that many people feel very bitter towards the studio and would not be as trusting of future launches. So we've seen Blizzard fall from grace over a number of years, and I'm not saying they can't rebuild that. I think they've made a lot of steps in the right direction. But it's going to take continued progress, and it takes probably 5 or 10 good steps to undo one bad one. So we should be excited that there are so many new ones here. And will they all be successful? No. But his definition of a good MMO is that it makes it to the top 10. You've listed, it feels like at least 10 new games. They can't all be in the top 10, or the existing top 10 would all have to fall. Every single one of them would have to fall. That's not going to happen. So you're not really hoping for all of these to succeed. You're wishing each of them the best of luck, knowing that likely only 1 or 2 of them will be around 36 months from now. And then the question is, which one? Maybe you have a preference. I'm rooting for all of them because I think many of them bring something unique to the party.
Mediocrity, because they were just desperate. That's how it feels with the MMORPG genre. When I critique World of Warcraft, when I critique Final Fantasy XIV, people are looking at these games like they're 9 out of 10, 10 out of 10 games. I don't think any of our current MMOs are above a 5 out of 10, to be perfectly honest. I guess people are rating them relative to one another, comparing trash to slightly less trashy trash in an effort to figure out what is the best trash when we haven't experienced something other than trash for the...
I don't think he likes MMOs. The entire genre is not good, right? So if I don't like hamburger and I don't like beef meatballs and I don't like beef, I don't like beef barbecue and I don't like beef in, like a bolognese, and I don't like beef in meatloaf, and I don't like roast beef on a sandwich, and I don't like... maybe at a certain point I don't like beef.
The past 10 years. It genuinely feels like we've been fed crap for so long that people can't even imagine what a good MMORPG would be anymore, or what that would even start to look like. It's very difficult for me to concisely get...
I think we know what it is. I don't think any one game is knocking it out of the park on every single aspect, but I think Final Fantasy XIV Shadowbringers is an immensely good expansion. Is it perfect? No. Are there things about it that I think Endwalker can improve on? Yes. Do I think WoW has some redeeming features? Of course. I don't think every single person that logs in says, I hate every single aspect of this game. There's something there. I'm getting into Guild Wars 2 for the first time this week, and I bet there's a lot of things I like. And will I see it all on the first day? No. And so there will be players who have 2,000 million hours in, and they're going to say, he doesn't know that it's crap in this way. You're right. I don't. But that doesn't mean that all the things that I'm enjoying aren't to be enjoyed. It doesn't mean that those aren't good things.
Get my feelings on this topic across without coming across as an asshole. I'm sure that's how it's come across, and if it has, I apologise. Ultimately, what I've been trying to say is that at this point, I was really hoping we'd have better. And I'm frustrated that as a community our standards seem to be dropping and we're not demanding better as well. I guess this brings me to the next part of this video, which is my channel and MMO content going forwards. Obviously this year I wanted to put out more content than I have in previous years. I've now got a video editor so I can actually do that. It's absolutely not sustainable for me to just cover MMO content anymore. There's just not enough content to make. I'm completely out of ideas. I've been out of ideas since 2017. I can't believe I've managed to scrape the barrel for that long. So going forward, I'm going to be branching out. I'm going to be covering survival, general multiplayer games, single player RPGs, kind of similar themed stuff to what's already on the channel, but just branching out a little bit more. And obviously, if there's other MMO content that I actually do want to cover, stuff that's relevant, stuff that I think you guys are going to be interested in, then I'm obviously going to cover that. I know that 80% of my subscribers, I think, are only interested in the MMO stuff. But if you could give the other stuff a chance, the new stuff, the survival stuff, the general multiplayer games, and maybe just watch the video for entertainment rather than serious review stuff, or to find the next big MMO, then I would really appreciate it, because branching out is always a very...
So I think he hits on something as he wraps up here that really actually sums up everything I've said over the last couple of videos and my individual impression of his impression. And I think he hits on that there is a discrepancy in what his definition, starting in Wrath of the Lich King, which was a long time ago, of where MMOs can go from here. This distant, faraway land, 15 years in the future, where when they take the aspects about an MMO I like, and they change them in the ways that I think they should go, it's just going to be astounding. And what ended up happening is he wasn't in the room, just like many of us, and his expectations aren't the direction they went. There are expectations I had that are not the direction they went. They were somewhere off in his path. So instead, the game developers and the people who fund these games and the people who market these games and the players who offer feedback and the content creators that steer whatever level of influence they have led the genre this way. And I don't think any one developer, I don't think any one publisher, I don't think any one financial backer or content creator or anything like that, one forum poster, was solely at the driver's seat. I don't think we get to call up any of these one people and say, you're in charge of all MMOs. But there is a general trend, like a whole bunch of fish or like a pack of birds, where we're kind of just undulating, and we all went this way. Not because any one of us wanted to go this way, but because that's where the general momentum took us. And the further we got from his expectations, the more discontent he got. To the point where having 10 new ones on the horizon isn't good news anymore. It's just a sign of more bad news to come. It's just a waste because the players won't appreciate it. The games won't be good enough. Bad, 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 bad. The existing ones aren't good because they have gone so far in this direction that in his opinion they've gotten worse. They have progressed. They have iterated. They have expanded. They are bigger than ever before. They are higher graphics than ever before. Games haven't gotten worse graphics. Games haven't removed more content than they've added. Games haven't woke up in the morning and said, how can we make our game worse today? And as a result, occasionally they've gotten things right. Maybe out of 10 changes, they don't go 10 for 10. But as a general rule, they are going where the majority of people want to go. But they are not going where LazyPeon goes. They are not going where many of us feel at least part of ourselves go. They are not going in the ways that there are things that I have wanted for the genre that don't go. It hasn't gone that way. But not all of me is over there. And when I look objectively as possible at what all do people enjoy about games, not just the way I enjoy games, but the way people around me enjoy games, there is more satisfaction happening over here than dissatisfaction over here. We have headed in this direction. It is not perfect, but it is where we have headed. And so I would say that my recommendation to LazyPeon, who didn't ask for this, would be maybe you don't like where this bus is going. Maybe you don't like the highway we're on. And I don't think we're changing directions. I don't think we're going to take a hard left and try to get over where you want us to be. I don't think that's in the genre's wheelhouse. I don't think that's in the plan. So as a result, I would say, look at one of the other genres. It clearly means a lot to you to play multiplayer games. It clearly means a lot to you to have PvP. It clearly means a lot to you to have a little bit of narrative, but don't try to take on single player. It clearly means a lot to you for the sense of community to be driven by a meta or by a series of player interactions that ultimately affect the way the game feels, the texture. Maybe it physically manifests itself in the game, maybe it doesn't. But there is something about the game that is undulating and pulsing that is not 100% under the developer's control. These things are not exclusively explained by MMORPGs. There are other genres that tackle them. Survival is a great one to tackle. There is a ton of sandbox within survival, and there is a ton of multiplayer. There are whole communities that make some of these games, depending on how you view them and how you define it, massively multiplayer. When you go look for PvP, talking about adjacent genres, talking about getting more into the Fortnites of the world, the MOBAs of the world, they are massively multiplayer. Players impact the world. Now, they're round-based, right? But there is something there. It's very PvP driven. So I would say, A, don't look for one game to satisfy everything you want from all of gaming. It'll never be that. Every game that's tried has failed. It's too much for one game to build and get paid for. B, once you know that, once you admit that, say, okay, can I get 80% of what I want from games over here and then 20% right here? And now I've gotten it down to 2 games. If not, can I get it down to 3 games? That's my suggestion for people that feel that way. It's why when people ask me, as I cover on this channel and as I cover over on Work to Game, are you ever going to go into the hardest content in Final Fantasy XIV? And my answer is probably not. I'm never going to say never because I don't like absolutes. It doesn't leave me an opening to change my mind later. But I can say that there is more reward for me as a person and for the type of content I want to create and the type of games I want to enjoy and the community that I want to be a part of in continuing to be a casual gamer, even though I'm playing more in a week now than I was in a month. But to take that opportunity, to take that extra amount of game time and use it to be a casual gamer across more games instead of a hardcore game player across one. Instead of rising to the absolute pinnacle of Final Fantasy XIV, clearing Ultimates, clearing Savage, ranking in the next rebuilding, I could instead stay at the casual level I'm at now, but do it across more types of content. I'm getting into more classes than I've ever gotten into before. I'm getting to side content like Blue Mage and Triple Triad. I'm getting off into content where there were people on stream today who played this game for years and said they didn't know that thing exists. I did some Chocobo racing today. It was awesome. I then want to take any remaining time and I want to go play World of Warcraft to that level. Not to Mythic, not to M plus 15 keys, not to top rated PvP, not to get a spot at the Invitational. Then I want to add Guild Wars and I want to add ESO. And I want to add all of these games. And there's not enough time in the day. I won't get to all of them. But I want to be a casual gamer in all of them because they're all a different take on the same problem. The genre has a set of features, it has a set of objectives, and they all prioritize them differently and solve them differently. And yes, it's the same feature list, but they all view those features as different importance and as a different solution to those features. It's why World of Warcraft players hate Final Fantasy and vice versa. Not all of them, but enough of them that it shocks me because they are very much the same game. It's why I look forward to getting to Guild Wars, where it from everything I've watched, solves some of the core features of what an MMORPG currently is defined as, right? On the bus that's moving over here. What it's currently defined as, it's defined it as something different. And it said, it heard the same feature list, the same request went in this ear. But it got processed differently, and something else came out Guild Wars' mouth. They said, okay, this is what we're thinking. That's weird, because we asked the same thing of World of Warcraft and Final Fantasy, and that is not the answer they came up with. And sometimes that comes down to monetization. Sometimes that comes down to desire to develop a community of a certain type, foster certain types of interaction. Sometimes they like competitive within their community. Sometimes they don't. Sometimes Communities want to push add-on support and modded play to create a wider set of experiences. Sometimes they want that to be more fine-tuned. There are a number of choices that developers make, and they can actively foster a community. They cannot build one. They cannot recruit one. They can hinder one. They can destroy one. And they can create the tools by which one is shaped. But that's it. After that, they get who they get. So I think these games put a set of features in. They put a set of community guidelines in. They respond to what an MMORPG is as of this year. And it'll be something different next year and the year after that. And it will change in the way the genre wants it to change, not in the way any one of us players wants it to change. That does mean that some of the things we want for the genre will never come to be. And the games may actively move away from it. That may happen. But that's not because the genre is not improving. It's not because it's not progressing. It's because our expectations of what the word progress mean and the reality of what the industry has defined as progress are different. And as those get further apart, we're doomed to feel dissatisfied with it. And so we either need to realign ourselves and focus on the silver lining, focus on the things that we do like about where it's headed, or we need to go play something else. Because games are something that's meant to be enjoyed. Games are something that is meant to foster a part of your life that's better than all the times that are not games. It's meant to be something that can bring us together with friends and family and strangers, whether we're from different walks of life, different political backgrounds, different religions, different ethnicities, different socioeconomic backgrounds, different levels of education, different life experiences across the gamut. And we all get to sit down and enjoy games. And so I think when you lose sight of that, games move away from being something that is worth rejoicing, worth cherishing, and worth driving people to, worth asking people to join you on, worth being excited about. And so I'm sure at some point I will feel the way LazyPeon feels today. I don't think it's a foreign feeling to many of us. I would just say that when that feeling starts to take you, you need to sit back and ask yourself how the industry got where it is. Ask objectively and listen. And if that doesn't sound like a good set of reasons to you, then just know that that set of reasons is clearly what's at the driver's seat. And so it's time to go align yourself with a developer, a publisher, or another genre that better aligns with that set of values. And it is possible that what you want, when we sort by total percentage of population, doesn't put you in the top 10 most mainstream ideas. It is possible you only care for the 12th, 15th, 20th most popular idea. And that's okay. We're talking about an industry that is so big that being the 25th biggest MMO is still enormous. It's still a wonderfully large amount of people. It's still more people than you will ever interact with in your entire life, in real life. You will never, ever shake 1 million people's hands. And if a game only makes it to 1 million players, it's considered a failure. It's not a failure. The industry will say it doesn't place on some leaderboard. But does that mean that some game developer from a bigger studio can't play it and be inspired and take some essence of what's there and use it to drive a future feature? No. Does it mean it can't change the way you view games? No. Does it mean you're not allowed to enjoy it? No. There's people who like Fallout 76. And the vast majority of the community just doesn't feel it hit the mark, to put it gently. There were people who were sad when Anthem was shut down. There are going to be people who like New World, whether or not it's the majority of people who play it. There are people who absolutely love World of Warcraft, Final Fantasy, ESO, Guild Wars, Old Republic, Roblox, EVE Online. I don't remember what all was in that list. Old RuneScape. There are people that love those games, and they're not wrong for doing so. They just think differently. So this was a 2-part thing about me ranting. The second one went long because I just wanted to get my thoughts in afterwards. Trying to get these React posts in on Monday. If they're always going to turn into this kind of podcast length, maybe I need to think about the format. Because really, this channel is a place for me to react. It's a place for me to go over weekly news. Talk a little bit about games that I care about. Compare them to each other. But most importantly, just always make sure that it's a chance to talk about gaming. Kinda.